Kirby Air Riders has released to some pretty solid reviews. The original Air Ride was judged harshly by critics, so it's nice to see the sequel finally realizing its potential. However, just like with every game, there are bound to be a few outliers, and for once, it's actually not everyone's favorite punching bag IGN. This time Metro Game Central gave Air Riders a 4 out of 10, which seems like plain rage bait to trap people like me. It worked. I've never heard of this site before, but they claim to offer expert exclusive gaming analysis, so I was curious to see how they landed on such a raspy score. I personally believe any rating can be justified, as long as it's backed by clear reasoning and logical argumentation. However, without giving too much away, this one is worse than the infamously awful IGN review of Kirby Triple Deluxe. As someone who worked as a game reviewer for over 3 years in the past, I understand how frustrating it can be when your critical analysis is reduced to just a number. That's why instead of plainly trashing the score, let's actually read the full review and examine how they arrived at that conclusion. But before we start, a word from our sponsor. This video was sponsored by My Machine. Buy our newest machines before we artificially create demand by threatening to take them down from the market. Enjoy high quality vehicles such as Boxstar, which combines your favorite box buy character into one machine, or Contract Star, which you would be a fool to miss out on. More are created right now, so buy the stars you just saw before they are gone forever. The article starts with a statement that immediately makes me question whether it's meant to be taken seriously or if the author lives behind a moon in another solar system. Air Riders is described as one of the most controversial Nintendo sequels of recent times, and I'm genuinely wondering where this supposed controversy ever happened. If anything, Air Riders has consistently been seen as one of Nintendo's few goodwill titles, released amidst a wave of questionable business practices. From the beginning, the game felt like an honest attempt to please a dedicated fanbase rather than a title chasing purely financial gain. From the weird summer release date to the inexplicable lack of news about a new Super Mario game, they unironically pulled a Nintendo has forgotten about Mario in a Kirby Air Riders review. The decision to develop a new Super Mario game has absolutely nothing to do with how another franchise is handled. Just because Nintendo chose to create a 3D Donkey Kong title using the Mario Odyssey team doesn't mean the other releases are related in any kind. It's actually very simple. Different games are developed by different teams and different departments, yet you still see people complain about the existence of one title simply because it isn't another title they personally wanted, as if software development is a zero-sum game. We've kept reminding ourselves of the fact that over the last few months, Nintendo has engaged in bewilderingly expansive marketing campaign for the sequel, which has somehow included 2 one-hour-long Nintendo Directs. Why so much effort is being expanded on the game, we have no idea, and the more we've played it, the more confused we've got. The reviewer describes Air Riders marketing as a bewilderingly expansive campaign, but in reality it was just a logical and well-executed strategy aimed at reassuring longtime fans. The game is primarily targeted at those who love the original Air Ride, and the marketing reflected that. Both Nintendo Direct presentations felt tailor-made for Air Ride enthusiasts, emphasizing that the sequel would stay true to its roots. That's exactly how you market a successor fans have quietly hoped for over many years, with clear communication and a deep understanding of what made the original special. On top of that, this is Sakurai we're talking about. Any game he directs is bound to have multiple directs, because first, his name carries weight, and second, people genuinely put trust in his works. He has the experience and presence to show up on camera and explain every detail with care, whether it's Smash, Kirby, or even Doshin the Giant. If Sakurai is directing the game, it's going to get the spotlight, regardless of the IP. Apart from anything, it's very odd that Kirby Air Riders is coming out so early in the Switch 2's lifetime, considering Mario Kart World has already provided a high-profile, family-friendly racing game for the nascent format. I actually agree, but there are a few factors that explain the situation. Mario Kart World started development back in 2017, while Air Riders didn't begin until 2022. In 2017, Nintendo had no way of knowing exactly when Mario Kart World would release, let alone that it would end up on the Switch 2. By the time that shift happened, they were likely aware of the overlapping window, but they also knew Air Riders was a passion project. Yes, it will compete for sales and probably lose many to Mario Kart, but here's a genuinely bewildering concept. Not every game needs to be a massive commercial success. Isn't it kind of refreshing that amid all the recent corporate shady monetization, Nintendo's still releasing a game like Air Riders, something made primarily for a niche group of fans, and if it breaks even, it's even better. What's more, it wasn't Sakurai pitching the game, it was apparently Nintendo who approached him. For all their current faults, that decision description alone says a lot. What we do know is that Kirby Air Ride was a fundamentally flawed concept 20 years ago, and it has not aged well, especially as the three main modes are all more or less exactly as they were over 2 decades ago, to the point where this is really more of a remake than a sequel. Air Riders includes all the racing tracks, machines, modes and minigames from the original Air Ride. Because it's a sequel, I know, hard to imagine. Is every Mario Kart more of a remake just because it features the same characters, items and many reoccurring tracks? There are enough meaningful improvements here to justify Air Riders as a proper evolution. Special abilities, refined comeback mechanics, better controls, and on top of that, new features like My Machine, new top right tracks, a new city trial map, a roguelike story mode, new minigames, more characters, and boss battles. No one wanted a sequel that replaces all the familiar features for an audience that was never targeted in the first place. We wanted the established foundation, refined and expanded into its full potential, and that's exactly why Air Riders delivers. Kirby has always been a series aimed at young kids and non-gamers, and we assume Sakurai is trying to make things as simple as possible for them, but it doesn't work. The fact that you're always accelerating is hugely distracting and put off every casual gamer we showed it to, and while there are technically only 2 buttons to use, one of them does 4 things depending on the context. Kirby games are designed for players who may have never touched a game before, so the idea that auto acceleration is somehow hugely distracting doesn't really hold up. If you're a complete beginner, you don't have a standard to be thrown off by in the first place, no muscle memory to unlearn, no habits to rewire. And for everyone else, it's just a different control scheme. It takes 15 minutes to learn for anyone who can beat Cuphead's tutorial. However, the best part is that the reviewer immediately contradicts himself in the next passage. Anyone can start playing Mario Kart within seconds, especially if they turn on auto accelerate and auto steer. So is auto acceleration a problem for casuals or an easy onboarding option? Why is auto acceleration in Mario Kart good and hugely distracting in Air Riders? But with Kirby Air Riders, you're first encouraged to play an 11-step tutorial. The reviewer doesn't directly say the tutorial is a bad thing, but implies it by suggesting Air Riders needs one, whereas Mario Kart can be played within seconds. I don't see how this is a bad thing. You're not forced to play it, and it explains the basic features competently enough. It's a Kirby game and a fitting way to get to know Air Riders' unique mechanics. After a while, the lessons even shift to a more inconspicuous space in the menu, so they don't keep bothering you even if you haven't played any of them. One which doesn't explain why there's an arrow and gun sight bobbling about in front of your character all the time. I'm not quite sure what the article is referring to, but if it's the little arrow in front of your rider, you can just toggle it off. And if it's the red pointer, it's so incredibly unobtrusive that many players will probably never even notice it. But even if you need that in a game as ostensible simple as this, it's surely a sign that something isn't right in the game design department. What does this have to do with the game design department? Air Riders is full of subtle visual cues that teach gameplay elements even beyond the optional tutorial. For example, the game tells you that damaging enemies or other riders increases your speed, but it also reinforces this visually by showing small blue stars flowing into your character. The little arrow is just another one of the visual aids, a simple, unobtrusive feature that helps smooth out the gameplay experience, and I haven't seen a single person actually complain about it. This is exacerbated by the fact that there's no structure whatsoever to any of the 3 main modes. There's no Grand Prix options and no tournaments of any kind. You just play a single race and that's it. There's then no particular reason to play again, other than to try and complete achievement style challenges like gliding for 3 seconds or completing a lap in a certain time. This passage is truly bonkers. For a moment it seems like the reviewer's about to show some self-awareness, but then just doesn't bother to go back and fix his own contradictions. I agree, the game could benefit from a Grand Prix or tournament mode that strings several races together, but to claim there's no structure whatsoever or no particular reason to play again, only to immediately backpedal with other than to try and complete achievement style challenges, is just bizarre. So there is a reason to keep playing the Air Ride mode. You're encouraged to complete achievements, which by the way are highlighted enough that you can access them from basically any menu. How is racing a Grand Prix where you just drive through a set of courses back to back somehow more of a structure than aiming to complete specific missions with actual rewards, such as character skins or new tracks? Both are perfectly valid ways to engage with the racing game, and not every kart racer needs to follow Mario Kart's formula to be considered legitimate. Both approaches offer players a reason to play the tracks, they just cater to different styles of motivation. Now we come to City Trial. After 5 minutes the match ends in a Mario Party style minigame that only lasts for a minute or 2 and involves things like completing a drag race or diving through numbered targets. None of these are interesting in their own right. right. Yes, City Trial can feel confusing or even unfun for some players, and that's totally fine. But to claim that none of the minigames are interesting in their own right is a strange take, especially considering how they each test a specific skill. Sometimes just one, sometimes several at once. Sure, you can play them separately, but that's not how they were designed. They are meant to be the chaotic payoff to a City Trial round, a random conclusion that makes every match feel different. Judging them outside of that context completely misconstrues the intent. The next point is just incorrect, and I say that as someone who has also misunderstood it at first. But I hadn't played Air Riders for hours pre-release. I just watched a fast-paced direct like everyone else. There's no guarantee any of the stats you have improved will prove useful, since everyone votes on which game to play, and if they all choose Drag Race, for example, and you haven't increased your speed stat, there's very little chance of you winning. It can be random if you choose that setting, but under normal conditions, it's not a voting system and you choose the minigame you want to play. This exists precisely to avoid scenarios where you're thrown into a minigame where you have zero chance of winning. That's also why the statement, "there's no guarantee any of the stats you have improved will prove useful," doesn't hold up. With 4 minigames to vote on, odds are at least one will suit your current build. And even if not, that is also the spice of City Trial, never knowing if what you do will help you ultimately. You can absolutely dislike the system or prefer a different approach, but from a reviewer, you would expect such a basic mechanic to be understood correctly before forming a critique around it. What's especially baffling about all this is that it's all essentially the same as the original game. The controls and options have been refined, the minigame choice used to be completely random, but they're still the same unengaging concepts underneath. So now the reviewer says the minigame choice used to be completely random, although he just implied the same for Air Riders. The review genuinely feels like a first draft no editor has corrected. The only real improvement is that the graphics are a lot better, with some very pretty stages in air ride mode, but so much of them are on the rails, literally in terms of grinding, but also little segues like dropping down a waterfall. That together with the constant acceleration, the whole thing feels only semi-interactive. To give the text at least some credit, I feel like this is a valid point to make. Although heavily refined, the racing part is still fairly automated, and thanks to all those new transition sequences, indeed semi-interactive. The only genuinely new mode in the game is a roughly 4-hour long, faintly roguelike inspired story campaign called Road Trip. Although the first problem there is that the plot is such utter nonsense, we began to wonder whether we were hallucinating it, especially given it's told through a series of very expensive looking cutscenes, with lots of hard science fiction elements. Yes, I love taking the plot of my Kirby Kart Racer spin-off seriously. It's utter nonsense, and that's exactly what makes it cool and entertaining to watch. The fact that this game even has high quality, expensive looking cutscenes is a privilege in itself. It easily could have been just a simple roguelike mode without any story at all. But let's wrap this up by taking a quick look at the summary. No structure in single player mode and very few new ideas. The structure is actually incredibly straightforward. You drive through 10 levels, each with a handful of challenges. After almost every stage, a cutscene expands on the story premise. Along the way, you upgrade your stats and collect new machines. One full run takes about 19 minutes, so in essence it's a traditional roguelike. It's highly replayable and serves as a welcome bonus on top of all the other modes. I have already outlined most of the major new features, and while many of these ideas might not be groundbreaking for the genre, they still represent a massive leap forward from the original Air Ride. What I find more offensive than the score itself is the sloppy writing. The review is filled with contradictions and vaguely formulated criticism that offer little substance. Phrases like "City Trial is not fun" or "it doesn't work" are just empty statements. They lack any clear reasoning or explanation for how the reviewer arrived at that conclusion. Back when I was working as a game reviewer, my editor always called me out when I was writing like that. It's the bare minimum to back up your opinion with somewhat logical arguments, good or bad. I assume these people get paid for their work, and even if not, this reads like early middle school level reviewing. The entire piece fits on 2 word pages, probably written in an afternoon between losing 5 rounds of City Trial, and it shows. It's painfully obvious the review is either cheap rage bait or was written with zero critical awareness, which sadly only adds fuel to the ongoing stigma that gaming journalism isn't worth taking seriously. And all of that because Nintendo won't stop forgetting about Mario.